there's one very powerful anti-inflammatory food that is going to surprise you. And I wish I knew about this a long time ago when I had my inflammation. I had a lot of gut inflammation, but you can apply this to any inflammation. This also applies to people with autoimmune diseases and anyone with a condition that is itis, which is inflammation of fill in the blank. Now, there is a huge connection and relationship between inflammation in your joints and inflammation in the gut. Many joint inflammatory processes, including many autoimmune diseases, originate in the gut. And I'm going to go through the foods that you should avoid first, okay? And then I'm going to tell you what you should be eating. But the foods that create the most inflammation would be related to something like gluten, which actually is in grains. Most of the grains create inflammation in your gut. Most people with arthritis don't know it, but their grains that they're eating are creating a lot of inflammation. Then you have the obvious things like alcohol, sugar, junk foods. Another name for junk foods would be ultra processed foods. Did you realize that 83% of all the calories in the grocery store are ultra processed foods? And we wonder why our digestive system is so messed up. Now, we also have corn. Okay, corn is very inflammatory. It's usually in some type of processed, refined corn product or high fructose corn syrup. But I think about like 96% of all corn is genetically modified, which means it could have traces of glyphosate, which is considered an antibiotic. It can actually mess with your gut flora and create other issues. And then we have soy, the same boat. Most soy is genetically modified. And soy and corn have lectins, which also irritate your gut, which then can stir up the inflammation. And by the way, corn is not a vegetable, it's a grain. Okay. And we eat corn in so many different things corn chips, tortillas. It's in a lot of foods, especially at the grocery store. And it's not in a whole form, it's in some type of refined form. There's even a new type of genetically modified corn that we have not really done the safety test yet, and that's going to be very interesting what happens with that one. And then, of course, we have the obvious seed oils too, like canola oil, the soy oil, the corn oil, all the oils that are highly refined. They're omega 6. They're inflammatory. We also have the A1 milk proteins. Okay, you always want to get A2. A very safe way to avoid the A1 is to have like milk products from either goats or sheep, as in sheep or goat cheese, or sheep or goat kefir. Both of those products are fermented and they have additional benefits. And both of them are the A2 type protein. But I will say that a lot of people have casein allergies, and that is the problem. But then again, they also might have a lactose, milk sugar intolerance. Okay. And that creates another issue. The same thing with gluten. You don't necessarily have to have an allergy, it could just be a gluten intolerance. And then we have just fiber in general, not to mention all the new functional fibers that they're coming out with, like the soluble corn fiber or the tapioca fiber, all these different fiber products that are supposedly going to be good for you, but they create more bloating and inflammation. If you have inflammation wherever it is, and if it's especially in the gut, you need to avoid fiber. And that includes all fiber, and especially the so called healthy, like plant proteins and beans and legumes and even vegetables. That's going to actually irritate your colon. You should probably do carnivore for a while and you'll probably feel a lot better. But I just listed all of the foods that greatly contribute to inflammation. So now let's talk about the most important food to get rid of your inflammation. This food has a very high level of glutamine. In fact, if you look at all the foods out there with the highest level of glutamine, it would be this food. But let me just explain what glutamine is. It's an amino acid for your colon cells, which is a single layer of cells that line the inside of your colon. This forms the barrier to your immune system deeper inside. But your intestinal cells are very hungry for glutamine. In fact, out of all the glutamine, they hog like 30% of it, okay, for themselves. Glutamine is very important in producing ATP energy. Glutamine fuels the intestinal layer of the cells as well as the mucosal layer where all the good bacteria hang out. And glutamine supports tight junctions. You see, I originally talked about this gut being a source of inflammation, but I didn't describe exactly what's occurring. What's occurring is leaky gut, which is intestinal hyperpermeability. You basically have holes in this single layer cell that goes right in, and larger molecules of food that are not broken down can get through there. And then your immune system tags them as a foreign entity to be destroyed. And that's when you start developing antibodies and allergies against foods. So, this problem really is a bypass of normal immigration. It doesn't give the normal stamp of approval through the immune system, and it gets through and it creates a lot of problems for you. So, all of those bad foods I talked about kind of put a hole through your intestine. And glutamine is the solution for that. But now the question is, what food has the most glutamine? And the answer is meat, specifically beef, the thing that they're trying to get rid of right now. They're trying to get rid of cows because of just some ridiculous reason, but beef gives you a super healing protein, glutamine, that can greatly support your gut and other types of inflammatory conditions, whether you have an autoimmune or some other type of non autoimmune joint problem or whatever. Now, you can actually take glutamine as well, but beef is the best anti inflammatory food that you can possibly eat. In fact, before the ketogenic diet, when I was eating all those carbs, and when I switched over to beef, oh my goodness, did I feel better. It was incredible. I no longer had bloating, and it was really weird because I thought that you needed fiber to kind of push things through, but little did I know that beef really calmed the fire down in my gut, and a lot of inflammatory conditions went away. I had arthritis so bad in my hands and my spine, I had no idea it was connected to my diet and primarily all the carbs and grains I was consuming. You just have to try it. Let's say that you're a vegan and you want to know what is the best vegan source of glutamine. Ready for this? Cabbage. That's right, especially red cabbage, but all cabbage is loaded with glutamine. So those are the two foods that have the most glutamine if you were to look at like just the spectrum of a meat and a vegetable. And this is also what I talk about in other videos using like cabbage for gastritis or an ulcer or any type of GI inflammatory condition. You can't really do a lot of other vegetables and fiber, but that's the one that most people can deal with, especially if you do it in a fermented form, the sauerkraut, because that way you get all this glutamine from the vegetable, but you get the microbes as well. Now, there are other things that are loaded with glutamine as well. You have cheese from either a sheep or a goat, or the kefir, like I mentioned. You also have eggs and fish, and especially bone broth, okay? That's loaded with glutamine. So now I kind of simplified how to heal your inflammation and gave you the things that you need to avoid to really turn this thing around. I'm telling you, if you have inflammation, I don't care what kind, you should start eating these foods. These I would start basically eating beef and cabbage and just watch what happens to your inflammation. I think you'll be quite surprised. Now, because of the censoring and the suppressing of the algorithms on YouTube, it's becoming more difficult to find my content. And there's a lot of content that I cannot put on YouTube, unfortunately. So, to make sure you have full access of all my information, go to drberg.com and subscribe to my newsletter by clicking the link down below in the description. I will see you on the other side. Now, if you have not seen my video on sauerkraut, you should check it out. I put it up right here. It's actually very interesting.